Somewhere around your 30th birthday, a quiet thought arrives.
I'll have to...
If you'd been born 10,000 years ago, you'd already be dead. You've heard it your entire life. Ancient humans died young, by 30, by 40 at the very most, and then the body simply gave out and the story ended. But the real answer is far stranger. The number is real. Open almost any textbook and you'll find it sitting there. The average life expectancy of early humans was somewhere between 20 and 35 years. For most of human history, that figure barely moved at all. It looks like a sentence. It looks like proof that your distant ancestors lived short, brutal lives and vanished before they ever had the chance to grow old. It is one of the most misunderstood numbers in all of science. Here is the trick hiding inside it. Life expectancy is an average, and averages can lie. Imagine a village of 10 people. 5 of them live to be 70. The other 5 die in their very first year of life. What is the average lifespan of that village? 35. Not because anyone was destined to die at 35, but because the math took the long lives and the lost infants and smeared them together into a single, misleading middle. That is almost exactly what happened to our ancestors. The single number sounds like a life sentence. In reality, it is 2 completely different fates, crushed together until they vanish into one tidy figure. And once you truly see that, you can never quite read it the same way again. For most of human history, the most dangerous moment of your entire life was the very beginning of it. Childbirth was perilous. Newborns died of infection, of fever, of cold, of hunger, of things that today we barely think about. By some estimates, 1/4 to nearly half of all children never reached the age of 5. Each of those tiny, shortened lives pulled the average down, and it pulled hard. The number you read in the textbook isn't describing the lifespan of a grown adult. It's describing the brutal arithmetic of infant death. So what happened if you survived? This is where the whole story turns. Because if an ancient human made it past the gauntlet of early childhood, past the fevers and the first fragile years, their life expectancy didn't simply creep up to 40. It leapt. A person who reached the age of 15 in the ancient world could often expect to live into their 50s, their 60s, sometimes even their 70s. Those early years were a filter. Pass through it, and a long road stretched out ahead of you. Doesn't that change everything you thought you knew? Some of the clearest evidence comes from people who still live much the way our ancestors did. The anthropologists Michael Gurven and Caleb Kaplan spent years studying hunter-gatherer and forager societies all over the world, the Hadza of Tanzania, the Tsimane of Bolivia, the Ashe of Paraguay. In 2007, they gathered the data together and asked one deceptively simple question. If you strip away modern medicine entirely, how long does a human actually live? Their answer was startling. The most common age of death for adults in these societies was not 30, and it was not 40. It was closer to 70. The typical human lifespan, with no hospitals and no antibiotics, lands somewhere around 7 decades. Roughly where it has been, it seems, for a very long time. The body you are living in right now was never built to expire at 30. It was built to last. And the fossils agree. For a long time, scientists simply assumed that almost no one in the deep past survived into genuine old age. Then 2 anthropologists, Caspari and Lee, decided to actually count. They examined the teeth of hundreds of fossil humans, because the way a tooth wears down is a surprisingly reliable clock for a person's age. They sorted those individuals into young adults and older adults, and they tracked how that balance shifted across the ages. What they discovered, published in 2004, quietly rewrote the picture. Around 30,000 years ago, the number of humans surviving long enough to become grandparents didn't just inch upward, it exploded. For the first time in the human story, old people became common. Why would that matter so much? Think for a moment about what an old person actually carries. Not strength, not speed. They carry memory. The location of the watering hole that only fills in the driest of years. The plant that breaks a fever and the plant that kills. The story of the great flood that came 3 generations ago, and the high ground that saved everyone who climbed it. In a world with no books, no writing, no way at all to store knowledge outside of a living human skull, an elder was a library. And a library that survives the winter is a tribe that survives the winter. This is the idea behind what scientists now call the grandmother hypothesis. The anthropologist Kristen Hawkes spent years watching the Hadza, and she noticed something the older textbooks had completely missed. The hardest working people in the entire camp were often not the young, athletic hunters at all. They were the grandmothers. Older women dug deep for tubers, gathered food day after day, and fed their grandchildren directly, which freed up the younger mothers to have more children, sooner. A grandmother who lived a long life didn't merely survive. She multiplied her own bloodline through the children she helped to feed. Long life, in other words, was never a luxury. It was a survival strategy written quietly into the species itself. The tribes that kept their old people fed and safe were the tribes that remembered more, and the tribes that remembered more were the tribes that lived to see another generation born. So the entire question flips on its head. The mystery was never why ancient humans died so young, because the truth is that they didn't. The real mystery is why humans live so astonishingly long in the first place. Most animals fade fast once they can no longer reproduce. A female chimpanzee, our close cousin, rarely outlives her fertility by very much at all. But a human woman can live for decades beyond her final child. 30 years. 40 years. A whole second life lived on the far side of reproduction. In strict evolutionary terms, that is genuinely bizarre. Why would nature keep you alive and well-fed long after you have stopped passing on your genes? Because you were still useful. The biologist Caleb Finch has spent much of his career studying exactly why human lifespans are so unusual among mammals. His work points to something deep and slow. As our ancestors began cooking their food, controlling fire, and forming tight, cooperative social groups, they gained powerful protection from the things that kill quickly: infection, starvation, the cold of an exposed night. And as those fast killers slowly retreated, evolution suddenly had room to favor a different kind of body, one that burned slower and lasted longer. We didn't just become smarter. We became durable. Pound for pound, we turned into one of the longest living mammals on the entire planet, and not by accident. We became long-lived because long life, again and again, paid for itself. Now look at that textbook number one more time. 20 to 35 years. It was never the story of a short human life at all. It was the long shadow cast by 1,000 lost children, falling right across the figures of grandparents who lived to watch their grandchildren grow tall. The ancient world was not some place where everyone died young and frightened. It was a place where dying in infancy and living into old age stood side by side, often inside the very same family, gathered around the very same fire on the very same night. And you, sitting here, are the living proof of it. You almost certainly survived your own first 5 years, the single deadliest stretch any human being has ever had to face, without ever once knowing that you were in danger. Vaccines. Clean water. Warm, dry rooms. They quietly carried you past the same filter that took so many millions before you. The thing that truly changed in the modern world was never the maximum length of a human life. People were reaching genuine old age tens of thousands of years ago. What changed is that now, almost all of us do. So the long life you are living is not new. It is ancient. The 70-year-old. The grandmother by the fire. The elder who holds the entire memory of the tribe inside one fragile head. That person has been walking with us for a very, very long time. You are not living longer than your ancestors ever possibly could. You are living the exact life that a lucky handful of them always managed to reach, except now the luck has finally been spread out to nearly every single one of us. There is something almost tender hidden in that. Every birthday past 30 that you have ever celebrated. Every gray hair. Every story you were able to tell only because you were still alive and present to see it happen. None of it would have surprised a human being standing in a cave 30,000 years ago. They knew old age intimately. They prized it. They built the survival of their entire group around the precious few who managed to reach it. You simply belong to the first generation in all of history where reaching it became completely ordinary, where the gift that once went to a fortunate few now waits, quietly, for almost everyone. So the next time you catch that quiet thought on your birthday, the one that whispers that 10,000 years ago you would already be gone, you can finally let it fall away. Because if you had been born back then, and if you had made it through those first fragile years, you would not be standing at the end of your story at all. You would just be getting old enough to matter. Subscribe to Ken's channel now to join us in unraveling more truths about this world. See you in the next video.